Over the last couple of years, just about every guitar YouTuber has been raving about the brand Sire and claiming that they have the best mid-tier guitar range. So for example, they have the Sire T7, which is quite obviously modeled after a Telecaster style guitar. And spoiler alert, I also agree that this is a very nice guitar, especially for the price point. That being said, Sire just recently released a whole new series of guitars that is actually even less expensive than this series. So this is the T7, and this guitar is the new T3. So the question is, when you already have a very affordable guitar like this one, the T7, how much quality are you actually losing if you go even less expensive with one like this, a T3? Spoiler alert, I actually like the T3 better than the T7. So in this video, I'm obviously going to compare the Sire T7 to the T3. But before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about why I even purchased either of these guitars, because I've pretty much become known as someone who likes to buy very expensive guitars. Now, I've always been attracted to modern style guitars, but the only reason why I've recently started to explore more expensive guitars is because I just like the idea of having a very nice guitar that plays really well. I don't care what country it's made in. I don't really care what the specs are. I just want it to sound good, to feel good, and to be reliable. And in my past experience, going to a higher price point has brought me those guitars. But at the same time, I recognize that there are a lot of companies nowadays who are bringing that same thing, high quality, reliable, nice guitars, to a much lower price point. And so I started asking the question on my Guitarcraft and Other Stuff podcast, what is actually driving up the prices of these guitars? And to answer that question, I thought we should start with the simplest of all guitars, the Telecaster guitar. Now, the reason we use the Telecaster guitar as the benchmark is because some other guitars with fancy bridges, with fancy pickup configurations, with fancy set necks, so on and so forth, all of those features are things that can drive up the price of the guitar. But the standard Telecaster guitar, bolt-on design, no floating bridge, so we don't need to route the back at all for a tremolo system. It's not chambered. It only has 2 pickups. It's the simplest of all guitar designs. So theoretically speaking, if you had a very skilled luthier, the cheapest guitar you should be able to make is a Telecaster guitar. So on this quest to find nice budget instruments, it only makes sense that we start with the Telecaster. Now, to be completely honest, before I bought the Sire guitars, I actually tried a few Squires that were in the $200, $250, even $300 price range. And when I picked them up and I felt the necks and I looked at them, they just weren't good enough quality for me to purchase, even just for this testing. And so, at least for now, I completely skipped that $300 and below price range and jumped right up to the Sire T7, which is that mid-tier $600, $500 price range. And so we have the T7. Now, when we compare the T7 to the T3, some features jump out at us right away. The T7, of course, has a roasted maple neck. It has a gloss fingerboard and very nice inlays, along with locking tuners. The T3 has a regular maple neck that is not roasted, a rosewood fingerboard, less attractive inlays, and standard tuners. These tuners are not locking. And so right away, we have to think about the features of just the neck and the headstock. If you're someone who likes locking tuners, and I personally am, it might be better to just save a little bit more money and buy the T7. But if you're someone who doesn't care about locking tuners, all of a sudden we have another feature that we don't even need and that we can save money on. Now, when it comes to the roasting of the neck, the whole idea of having a roasted neck is that as you roast the wood, it sucks even more moisture out and it makes the neck even harder and even more reliable. That being said, the whole roasted neck thing has pretty much been a trend of the last 3 or 4 years. I've played many solid, high quality necks that would not move at all, that were not roasted. And since I haven't had these guitars for a long period of time through many seasons, I can't attest to how good the quality of the roasting is on the Sire T7 or how good the neck is on the Sire T3. So without knowing how reliable the necks are, I can't even compare the roasted to the standard just on the basis of it being roasted. That wouldn't be fair at all. The one thing I can compare right away today, besides the looks, is the quality and shape and feel of the neck. In terms of the neck shape and the neck size, this is pretty much the standard we get on most guitars nowadays, which I don't love because I think we deserve a little bit more variety, but whatever. It's a standard medium C. If you ever played a modern Fender, a modern Charvel, a modern Ibanez, a modern Schecter, they pretty much all have this very similar style neck. I do really like that both guitars give us a satin finish at this price point. That is absolutely amazing. And the satin on these necks feels very, very nice. It's very smooth. In terms of the fret leveling, the fret ends, the fret job, again, it's pretty much identical. If you look closely at the guitars, you'll see little imperfections here and there. So it's not like this flawless, perfect thing that you would find on a $3,000 guitar. But again, this is not a $3,000 guitar. And none of the imperfections visually actually impact the way the neck feels on the T7 or the T3. Now, the bodies of these guitars are actually exactly the same. They have the same shape and they have the same carving on the lower horn. So you're not paying more money solely to get a different style body. In terms of the paint jobs, in my opinion, the Sire T7, at least this version of the T7, is more attractive than this version of the T3. That being said, whether or not you like this guitar's looks more than this one, and whether or not you even care about looks to begin with, that's going to be entirely a subjective, personal thing. And there are, of course, several T7s that look very similar to T3s. So I can't even say here that the difference is that every T7 looks better than every T3. That simply isn't the truth. Now, just looking at these two bodies, and again, I didn't do extensive research. I'm telling you how these guitars feel in my hands as a player. The T7 body looks like it's made of 2 joined pieces of wood. The T3 looks like it's made out of 3 pieces of wood. Does that actually matter? Now, things get really interesting when we talk about the bridge itself. The Sire T7 has the traditional looking Teles bridge with the 3 saddles. And the Sire T3 has a similar Teles bridge, but we have the Stratocaster style saddles. And me personally, and I'm not the only one who feels this way, some guitarists feel this way as well, I like the idea of the Stratocaster saddles more than the traditional Teles saddles because for me personally, these saddles are easier to intonate, and again, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Now, the pickups are going to be a really big deal here because, for example, if the T7 has great pickups that you never have to change, and the T3 has horrible pickups that you need to change right away, then all of a sudden, just the cost of the pickups alone is going to make the T7 a better choice. But that's not actually what I experienced. Both of these guitars sound pretty similar, and to be completely honest, I don't know if they have different pickups or not, but the T3 sounds better to me in my room, in my situation. Is it objectively better? No, definitely not. I think the sound difference between the T7 and the T3, just like the bridge, is going to be more of a personal preference thing. So in my opinion, what we have is two very, very similar guitars. The only major difference for me is the locking tuners on the T7. Now, I happen to have 2 or 3 pairs of locking tuners sitting around that I have as spare parts. And so I'm not going to be keeping the T7. I'm actually going to be putting locking tuners that I already have on the T3 and keeping the T3, because for me, this guitar is actually a little bit better. For me, in my context, I don't mind that the neck isn't roasted. I'm going to take the risk that it might not be as stable, and we'll deal with it when we get there if we have to. I don't care that it's not as attractive, and I like the bridge more, and I even like the pickups more. If you're going to be looking at the T7 and the T3 and you want to make your own buying decision, I think you should base it mostly on whether or not you need the locking tuners and whether or not you need the traditional Teles style bridge. For some people, that is a big feature. If that's a big feature for you, and roasted maple neck and the locking tuners, definitely go with the T7. But like I said, for me, the T3 is plenty. Now, although I do like both of these guitars, neither one of these guitars is my favorite Telecaster. But if you want to know what my favorite Tele is, I will link it in the video right up here. By the way, I'm Andre Flood, and I'll talk to you soon.